But at least with Jeff Gorton, he has the experience on paper. You couldn't say that about Mark Bergevin when he was hired. And you can't say that about Kent Hughes either. You know, they formed this committee with Bob Gainey and whoever else to come in and interview 10, 12, 15 people or whoever it was. And in the end, Jeff Gorton just hired his guy, the guy that he wanted from the get-go. And I'm not sitting here, you know, going to say he's doing a great job this year at all. I'm not going to say that. The whole franchise, you know, at ice level specifically, you know, needs to check themselves. What's going on, guys? Don't let that preview fool you. Watch this whole video, or, you know, I kind of rant and rave at the beginning, so bear with me. But if you want to skip specifically to where I start to talk about Kent Hughes and what I think he'll bring to the organization, somewhere around the 14 or 15 minute mark, maybe someone will timestamp it down in the comments. As usual, disagree with anything I say, get in on the discussion. It's good to see you all again, and if you enjoy these videos, hit that subscribe button. Well, there you have it, folks. The Montreal Canadiens GM search has concluded. They have found their guy. Well, specifically, Jeff Gorton has found his guy. But you know what? It's great to see the crucial areas of this new Canadiens front office take shape. Of course, as previously mentioned, we have Jeff Gorton in the vice president's role. He'll clearly have a heavy hand in terms of hockey operations in this new front office. And of course, he is working below our owner and president, Jeff Molson. I also, before I get into the new GM hire, I don't want to forget to mention the brand new Vice President of Communications for the Montreal Canadiens, and that is Chantal Maccabee, and she is highly respected in her field. She's been with RDS for many, many years, and I think she is perfectly suited to, you know, let the relationship between the media and the fans and the franchise flourish. She has, you know, extensive experience on the media aspect of it and representing the fans to an extent, and I think she is the perfect candidate and the you know, very deserving of her brand new position with the Canadiens. And I couldn't imagine being in her shoes, you know, accomplishing a lifelong dream to, you know, I'm not even sure she would have ever expected to be able to, you know, work for the Canadiens at some point in her career. So very happy for her. I've always loved her work and her level of professionalism and class, the way she reports the facts. And we're already seeing, you know, her doing a stellar job in the role with the Canadiens already. So, you know, hats off to Chantal for that role. I think it's a wonderful hire. Great job by Jeff Molson and Jeff Gorton getting her you know, entered into the organization. Now, the Canadiens have found their brand new shiny general manager, and his name, Kent Hughes. Where did he come from? Well, we'll get into that because it's a bit of an outside-the-box hire. But first, guys, welcome back to the Scotian Canadian channel. It's good to see everyone. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season, and I hope everyone's doing well. And you know what? To welcome you back to the channel, I'm going to give away a Scotian Canadian t-shirt. All you got to do is get in on the discussion down in the comments. So welcome back, guys. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. The Montreal Canadiens have hired Kent Hughes to be the next general manager for this team. The final candidates for the role were Matthew Darche, as well as possibly Daniel Briere as well. First and foremost, congratulations to Kent Hughes on becoming the 18th general manager in Montreal Canadiens franchise history. That's a huge accomplishment for a man from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I can't even imagine. A degree in law, comes up as a player agent, now a long-time player agent with plenty of high-profile clients in the NHL. Chris Letang, Anthony Beauvillier, Patrice Bergeron, among many others. And now he's making the jump to becoming a general manager in the NHL of the most prestigious club in the league. So huge accomplishment for him. So congratulations. I'm looking forward to seeing what this new front office, you know, puts together and what, you know, path they take. You know what? Out of all the candidates that it came down to, you know, I know there's a lot of people disappointed that it was not Patrick Waugh, but at the end of the day, you know what? I just don't think he was suited for this role at this time. I think it would have been exciting, you know, and entertaining to have him come in as general manager. I'm just not so sure it would have been the best in terms of building a, you know, modern style, hopefully a dynasty here in the next, you know, few years. That's what you always hope for. Not just a team that's going to win a cup and disappear, you know, into the bleachers for the next decade, like is kind of what's, you know, happened to a lot of teams in the NHL, but specifically, to the Habs since their cup in 93. It just hasn't been, I expect this team to be at the forefront of the league at all times. I know that's not realistic, but to, be an average team or below average team for the last, 5 to 7 years, not ideal. Now, granted, all that being said, I do not take anything away from the cup run most recently. They deserved it. They entered into last season with the same rules as everyone else. They made the playoffs fair and square. It was not a fluke run. Maybe a miracle run, we'll call it that, but it was not a fluke. It was well deserved. Guys like Dano, Weber stepped up, played a big role. Ben Sherrod as well, Joel Edmondson. It wasn't just Carey Price, carrying us the whole way, pardon the pun. And there were other guys that made a big difference too. Corey Perry, Armia, that fourth line, Eric Stahl coming in. So you know what? Let's be realistic here. In terms of regular season success, this has not been a good team for quite a while. I liked the vast majority of the decisions that Marc Bergevin made. It just didn't seem to all gel on a consistent basis. I think what he was building toward, he wasn't building towards, a miracle cup run and then for this team to disappear. He said from the moment he was hired, Marc Bergevin wanted to build a dynasty, a team that would not go away, that would build through the draft and consistently, be an upper echelon team, and he failed at that, so he is no longer employed by this team. I think it was more than fair to move on from him at this juncture, at where they're at. And a lot of people in the past have criticized me for just agreeing with everything that this franchise does, or just being a fan of Bergevin and just, supporting his decisions. But, the reality is, it may seem that way, but there was a lot that he did that ended up, for the most part, panning out because of that playoff run. He built a team that was able to get through the grind of the playoffs. I don't mean to ramble about Bergevin too much here, but I say all this just to say that I still hope that a lot of what he did pans out, him and Timmins, because I think for the betterment of this franchise, and that's what I truly am rooting for at all times, is the logo. That's it. Like, I want this team to win a Stanley Cup, and that's, I'll evaluate each move, and how I think the franchise is going to be better. There's a lot of what Bergevin did I didn't like, but there's a lot that I did, and like I mentioned, I'm hoping that, where we stand today, and I think it's a pretty good spot, a good structure, a lot of depth in the franchise up and down. And I hope the past moves and the past experiences of this team, including that incredible cup run, is what's going to help us, despite this bad season, build something great here moving forward with this new leadership group. I think it's especially with the amount of picks that they have moving into this draft and the amount that's already been drafted, it's a good spot to be in. But you know what? I think a major focus of this new front office will be development. I mean, Jeff Molson spelled that out himself when he fired Marc Bergevin, is that development needs to improve in this franchise. And I think it's pretty obvious just by looking at our draft history. I'm not writing off any prospects that were drafted, 2018 and beyond, because it does take time for guys to, come into their game and their bodies and their athleticism and all that. So, but prior to that, I mean, it's not looking good, for the draft results. And that may be poor scouting, maybe, but it really also could be, and I personally think it's more poor development. And where the Canadiens have drafted, listen to this, the Montreal Canadiens have drafted more players than any team in the NHL the last 3 years. That includes a few teams that are blatantly and obviously rebuilding, which I believe the Habs have been doing the last 3 years under Bergevin, kind of behind the scenes, trying to compete, but also rebuilding behind the scenes, bring in young assets, not trading away picks, bringing in picks. So, just think, the year we made the bubble playoffs, had we not been thrown into the bubble, the Habs would have been drafting somewhere in, top 5, definitely top 10. Instead, we get thrown into that playoff, win the qualifying round, and eventually find ourselves drafting, 16th, middle of the first round, instead of in the top 5 or top 10. Luckily, it ended up becoming Caden Gooley, and he's looking like a strong prospect for us. But let's be real here. The Canadiens were rebuilding, and that, top 5 pick, what would have been a top 5 pick, would have been massive for this franchise long term. Instead, you know, Bergevin, maybe his plan to rebuild kind of got thwarted by what happened after getting thrown into that bubble, winning the round, seeing that, oh, these guys can actually play playoff hockey. So I think moving forward, this team is on good footing as long as they can develop these players they've already picked in the last few years. That is crucial. You know, say what you will about Bergevin, if you're a supporter or not. I don't think anyone should be hoping these kids of the last few drafts under Berg and Timmins, you know, don't pan out. We need, you know, not including this upcoming draft where we have another 11 picks in this upcoming draft. Amazing. It's a great spot to be in if you're a team that's looking to restructure or reset or rebuild or whatever word you want to use. But that being said, from 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, those last four, specifically the last three even, we need to end up with an elite player. You know, and there's, you know, we got we've got Caulfield, who, you know, you can't consider him a prospect now because of the amount of NHL games he's played, but to me he's still on that level of, he's so young, right? You know, he's a good bet to maybe become elite. You know, Suzuki, of course, I think he's on his way already, but we didn't draft him, so I can't give credit for that because we didn't draft him. But, you know, there's Caulfield. Romanov may not become an upper echelon elite top pair guy, but he's on his way to becoming a legitimate top four defender. He's come around. He's grown a lot this season. So those are some guys who might, you know, fall into that elite status sooner rather than later. Caden Gooley, I think, is a good bet to potentially be a top pair shutdown guy. You know, and then, you know, you have your next tier. You got the Logan Mayus and the Sean Farrells and the Matthias Norlinder and Joshua Waugh and, you know, Jaden Struble, Jordan Harris, right? I think, you know, because of the sheer quantity that we drafted, we should just, you know, essentially at a sheer luck and fluke end up with some elite talent out of all those guys. But you don't want to rely on that. I mean, so all that being said, I really think Kent Hughes was brought in to be part of a tandem. And I know there's a lot of talk about Jeff Gorton is the real general manager and Kent has been brought in to just be his puppet, just be his media relations guy, sit in front of the microphones and the cameras and discuss the moves that Jeff Gorton makes, which I think is complete and utter nonsense. And forgive me if that's your opinion, but I truly think it's complete and utter nonsense, especially considering what they're likely going to be paying Kent Hughes to be general manager. Apparently he's a harsh negotiator and he didn't want to move away from his agency business, which we'll get into that. I know I've barely spoken about Kent Hughes to this point, but I think you know, Jeff Gorton, an experienced hockey executive, he knows he's in a position where he can bring in someone who can help him immensely. Why would you bring in someone just to talk for you? It just doesn't make sense. I understand why people feel this way or are thinking this way, and it may be true, you know, and it likely is true that the final call lies with Jeff Gorton. He's the vice president. He'll clearly be involved in hockey ops because that's his bread and butter, is building teams, is drafting, you know, players. That's where his specialties will lie. He has significant experience doing so. Now, Kent Hughes on the other side as GM, and here we'll get into Kent Hughes. Okay, so he's a former agent. Now former agent. Up until today, he was an agent, and he was one for many, many years. I think upwards of 20 years. He owned or was a high-level executive in his own agency business called Quartex, working as an agent, but becoming an managing director of that agency. He had plenty of high-level NHL players under him, as well as, you know, depth NHLers as well as his clients. So Kent Hughes' bread and butter here is going to be player relations. He's going to be the guy that is, you know, keeping tabs on his players. And I think a crucial aspect to his tenure, especially to begin in Montreal, will be completely revamping the developmental department of this franchise from top to bottom. Like I mentioned, Jeff Molson spelled this out as being an area that needs to be improved. I think that will be Kent's specialty. I think he's a guy that will know what young athletes need to reach their potential, to become successful. You know, so he's been the agent of Patrice Bergeron. which is, that's kind of interesting because Patrice Bergeron is a free agent this summer. Is there a chance maybe we could bring in Patrice Bergeron? Might not be the move they're looking to do in this state of build, but we don't really know what route they're going to take. I have my own ideas, but we'll see a lot tomorrow in their press conference at 5 p.m. Atlantic time. Jeff, and Kent will all be in attendance. We'll get an idea of their plan. But like I said, my expectation or my prediction right from the get is that Kent Hughes is going to be heavily involved in player development. Heavily involved. Now, of course, his other strength as a former agent would be his negotiation skills. And I've seen, not to go back into Bergevin too heavily here, I've seen a lot of people come out and say Marc Bergevin wasn't a good contract negotiator. That wasn't his specialty. I don't think that's true. I think that was one of Marc Bergevin's main strengths was his contract negotiating skills and trade negotiating skills. I know he's not every contract he signed was great. There's Carl Alsner, and you can say what you will about Carey Price's contract, but the guy just almost won a Stanley Cup under that contract. So there's that. There's some complaints about Gallagher's contract, but, maybe slightly overpaid. It's earned, He's having a down season like everyone else. I think he'll be worth that contract either for us or for someone else for the vast majority of it. I mean, and I think the solid contracts Bergevin signed that had a good impact on this team far outweigh the bad ones. I mean, you think about Pacioretty being on a discount contract for most of his time in Montreal. Same for Phil Deneau. Same for Brendan Gallagher. Before he got his new contract, he was being paid under $3 million. Jake Allen's contract extension was fantastic. I mean, he got Plecky and Markov signed to short-term deals back to back a few different times to keep them with the Canadiens. Back to Price, he could have easily left and gone elsewhere and gotten the exact same price. Pardon the pun again. Some complaints about Josh Anderson's contract, which, shut that down right away because the guy's a 25-goal scorer, a unique type of player. I can guarantee you the vast majority of GMs in this league would sign up to pay Josh Anderson that exact contract, and there were teams targeting him when he was available by Columbus, even though his contract demands were known, and Marc Bergevin got it done. So I don't see Kent Hughes coming in and his negotiation skills being this massive upgrade on Marc Bergevin. Maybe it will lead to being an upgrade in some sense. Maybe he won't take as hard a line as Bergevin did with Markov in the past or Radulov. Maybe he'll be able to work through these things with agents a little better than Marc Bergevin has. And because the thing is, Kent Hughes will know these players' worth. He has significant experience in working in that field. Player agents won't be able to maneuver their way around Kent Hughes. But again, that will be a strength for him, and that's likely an area of the franchise that he will be heavily involved in. Jeff Gorton taking the hockey ops and the drafting, and of course Kent will be involved in that too, but Jeff will spearhead that stuff, and then Kent will be in on the negotiations, the player development, the player relations, and of course, maybe being mentored into becoming a lone general manager for the franchise. I mean, it's yet to be seen. Now, the thing is there's a lot of criticism surrounding this Kent Hughes hiring. There's a lot of people excited about it. I'm personally, I wouldn't say excited, but I'm comfortable with it. I mean, like I mentioned, in the past, people would say that I just agree with everything Bergevin says, but I started this YouTube channel well into Bergevin's tenure. His first 3 years, I was very critical of Marc Bergevin. I just wasn't public about it. I wasn't on social media. I wasn't doing videos. I didn't agree or, appreciate Marc Bergevin's general manager philosophy until a few years in. And I'm going to treat Jeff Gorton the exact same, but at least with Jeff Gorton, he has the experience on paper. You couldn't say that about Marc Bergevin when he was hired. And you can't say that about Kent Hughes either. At least with Jeff Gorton, you can see that he has significant past experience. He's been in the role before with other, original six teams even too. Both the two teams he was with were original six, now the third. So, I'm more than happy to see that he's with the organization, Jeff Gorton, that he's the one making these crucial decisions. And I feel like I can trust his opinion in bringing in Kent Hughes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, in terms of Kent Hughes specifically, though, like I mentioned, no experience. None. And the thing is, every single current general manager in the NHL, except now for Kent Hughes, so 31 out of 32 current GMs in the NHL, were previously an NHL assistant general manager or an NHL director of player personnel. Every single one. So that's a legitimate criticism of this hire, definitely. Now, could it work out despite that? Of course. I mean, that wasn't always the rule. Look at Brian Burke, who was a player agent, and then he went on to be a GM, went on to be a very good GM, actually. A lot of what being a GM about is about developing relationships. And, I mean, Kent Hughes has a sparkling clean reputation, as far as we know so far. And I'm sure the Canadiens did their due diligence. So I'm going to judge his moves and wait and see. It'll probably be a good 2-3 years before I'm fully confident and not nervous about what direction this franchise is taking. I'm hoping they're very transparent, or as transparent as they can be tomorrow in their presser. But I'm not coming into this gonna just start fanboying Kent Hughes for no specific reason. I'm also not going to criticize him for no specific reason either, which some people are already doing. One of those being his name not being French enough. There's a very small portion of Quebec right now who are also very vocal. I don't think they represent this fan base in the slightest. Some may consider themselves purists. A lot of the people, or I assume a lot of the people with this type of opinion, are the older generations, we'll say that. But yeah, there's a bit of a controversy. Maybe not as far as a controversy, but some people are upset that this guy's name isn't French because they're calling him an Anglo hire by Jeff Gordon. And I can understand the criticism of, they formed this committee with Bob Gainey and whoever else to come in and interview 10, 12, 15 people or whoever it was. And in the end, Jeff Gordon just hired his guy, the guy that he wanted from the get-go. So was the whole committee thing just PR? Was it to keep people at bay? Was it to give a fair chance or to at least hear out some of the other potential candidates? Maybe. I definitely do find that a bit strange. But at the end of the day, if Kent Hughes is the guy that Gordon wants, and then Kent Hughes comes in and is just shines through his interview. I mean, I'm not just going to discount him because he has a connection or a past connection to Jeff Gordon. I don't think that would be fair either, especially if you're bringing in Jeff Gordon in a vice president role for his level of expertise. But I understand the criticism of that, not the whole French name thing. The guy is born... Kent Hughes was born in Montreal. Now, of course, he's lived outside of the province for many years. He's lived in Boston for a long time. But he was born in Montreal. He's fluently bilingual. He speaks French very well, apparently, according to Chantal Maccabi, which is great. I do think that there's value and that the Montreal Canadiens general manager should speak French. But I do like this approach of essentially hiring the best available executives and getting around this language barrier a little bit. Maybe that's why the structure is Gordon as vice president, but he's actually GM, and Kent Hughes as GM, but he's actually a GM. That might not be true. I don't want to feed into that crap too much either, but I just like that it seems as though we did get the best available options. Now, maybe Matthew Darche could have been someone who came in and provided some NHL experience, and it's yet to be seen. Maybe we will poach him from Tampa Bay. I doubt it, but you never know. I'm a little bit disappointed that Marc Denis has not been hired by the Canadiens in some capacity. I'm still holding out hope that he does get hired, the RDS analyst, because he's very thorough, he's very fair, he sees the game well. He's all class, he's a professional, he's a former Montreal Canadian. Of course, he's bilingual, all that good stuff. I think he'd fit very well, just like Chantal will in this organization, and just like Marc Dumont has, the journalist now for the Montreal Canadiens. I think that was a very good hire as well. So I'm liking what the Canadiens are doing in their front office and in their administration staff as of late. And you know what? I think the only things left to mention in terms of Kent Hughes and his new position with the Montreal Canadiens is his connections to a couple of our prospects. Kent Hughes has a son, Riley, who is draft eligible this year. And it's looking like he could go in the top 15 or so, maybe lower. I don't think he'll be in our range because the Habs will be drafting top 3. But Riley Hughes plays for Northeastern. And that is where Jaden Struble and, more importantly, Jordan Harris play. And Jordan Harris can go the route of unrestricted free agency in the next few months. One of our prospects, a highly touted prospect as well, and we do not want to see that happen. Left-handed defenseman, it's exactly the type of player this Montreal Canadiens franchise needs in their system. And hopefully this hire of Kent Hughes now increases the likelihood that we will be able to get ink to paper for Jordan Harris. Maybe, maybe not, but I think it does help out. Kent Hughes also, I believe, coached Jordan Harris way back when he was a younger kid too, so that could end up being a very crucial connection to start his tenure with the Canadiens. So, you know what, guys? Overall, I'm pleased with how the process played out. I understand some fans' frustration, but I mean, you're always going to have some people who disagree for the sake of disagreeing, and I think that helps keep everybody humble. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you keep it respectful, which some of this whole, Ken Hughes isn't Quebecois stuff is blatantly disrespectful, so I got no time for that. But you know what? Let's keep the discussion alive. Get at me down in the comments. I know there's a lot to discuss, a lot going on with the Habs right now. Coach Dom Ducharme is a huge topic of discussion. Feel free to discuss that down in the comments as well. I've had a lot of people will call me biased towards him, and maybe I am. I'm a Halifax guy. He won the Memorial Cup for us, for the Halifax Mooseheads, and I did want him to coach the Canadiens for a long time, and now he did, and then he went on a good cup run with them, but now this season has been an absolute tire fire, so I get the frustration with Dom Ducharme, but my approach with him is the same as it was for Bergevin, waiting a few years. Same as it's going to be for Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes. I mean, we're only, a year less into the coaching tenure of Dom Ducharme. He's got a cup final under his belt. And if you can't credit him for that, then you can't, discredit him for a bad season either. Or if you can credit him for the cup run, then you also have to discredit him for the bad season. So to me, either way, it's a wash. And I think he's... some people will call me crazy, but I think he is deserving of a clean slate, especially of a team that's going to restructure. Gordon and Hughes will sit down with Dom, and if they feel he's the guy they want to move forward with, at least in the short term, I don't see an issue with that at all. I really don't, and I think that is the most likely outcome here. So if you're very upset or, part of a crusade that wants Dom Ducharme fired, all I would suggest is maybe use your energy a little bit more wisely, because the reality is he's probably going to be around for a while. They've already said he's not getting fired this season. I suspect he'll be back next season as well. I mean, I don't think you fire a coach 1 year into his contract either, and it's just a 3-year contract, so they're not handcuffed to the guy. And I'm not sitting here, going to say he's doing a great job this year at all. I'm not going to say that. The whole franchise, at ice level specifically, needs to check themselves. But I also think there's value in putting the blame on the players here. Not all of it, but, I don't think you can just say, a coach has the magical system and he's going to make a team bad or good. I think some people are overvaluing the impact a coach can have. Now, I get the complaints about the effort not being there here and there, but I think you can also attribute that to cup fatigue and a cup hangover. And an even worse one, because you didn't even get to celebrate the championship win. You got to get that close, feel the heartbreak, and then start playing in what may feel to you as meaningless games. Going from playing in a cup final, that close to a championship, and then all of a sudden you're back into the grind of a regular season, not even a month and a half later. It just, everything went wrong for us this year. The shortened off season, a horrible off season, too much juggling. This is not the team I would have expected to come into this season. And you know what? For a coach to lose his number one center, his number one defenseman, and his number one goalie to start, I mean, you're starting behind the goal line where everyone else is starting a little ahead of you. So that's just my feeling on Dom, but feel free to discuss that down in the comments as well. But cheers, guys. It's been good chatting with you again. I'll see you soon. Go Habs, go, baby. Woo!